And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Designated Players Podcast. We're out here looking at yet another episode in our line of end of season reactions, predictions, what say you, on episode 188. There's been a lot of talk recently on if MLS should adopt the NBA style of award systems. So NBA, for those of you who don't know, has a first team, a second team, a third team. They have five players in each position with 30 teams. It's kind of tough not to include multiple people there. MLS only has one, and Tom Bogert, our good buddy Tommy Scoops, he's like, that's kind of wild. We shouldn't do that. So we're out here giving our first, second, and third MLS Best 11s. Before we do that, I do want to know, Connor, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, and I want to comment on Tommy Scoop's suggestion here because I would make the argument kind of against Tommy Scoop's idea here, and I know we're doing the idea, but here's the difference between the NBA and like MLS Best 11. The NBA only has five positions, so if you're just sticking to one, like first team All NBA, like only five players get recognized in the entire league, which is really small. So to have three teams gives you 15. It's pretty even then with a best 11. It's pretty close.
I would argue against your argument in saying that there are roughly or soon to be the same number of teams in MLS as there are in NBA. Would that be fair to say? So if every team has five starters in the NBA and you're only picking five for a first team, well, then you're basically picking five out of 30 teams, right? Well, if every team in MLS has 11 starters and you only pick 11 in a first team, you're still leaving out basically the same number, if not more, players. So I think that it's a good idea to maybe at least have a second team. Maybe third team's a little bit too, you know, too much, maybe, but I don't even think that. I think it's a good idea. I'm all for it. I'm really big on having it, and I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks because I mean, it's not going to make any changes, right? Like, we're not going to be like, oh, we're adding second and third team now, and everybody's going to be like, oh my God, MLS. Big time, baby. Big time. But I think it would make it a bit, it'd be fairer to recognize the players who have put in really, really good shifts over the season. Again, it obviously points itself towards the strikers and the number 10s, right? There are so many good attacking players in this league that is simply ridiculous not to include.
Yeah, but you got to give some love to the defensive players. You can't just ignore them.
No, absolutely. But that's why we need to have multiple teams because then you can go ahead and say, look, these six strikers were out of their mind this year. But we are only going to do two, maybe one of them in the current system. So I don't know. That's just me.
No, it's fair. It's fair.
All right. You know what else is fair?
Scarf of the week.
The amount of scarves that I have. And I say fair because if you judge it on a scale of poor to excellent, it's only fair. I need more scarves. So I've got one more new one coming in. I might buy another one after this just because I really want it. Um, but I'm assuming you've got something that is relatively close to. I mean, we've got 33 players to talk about. I'm sure you got a scarf for at least one of them.
Yeah. I went for a scarf of a team that I did not, well, technically based on preseason predictions, I did expect them to be here, but I was surprised how many players from their team I actually ended up putting across the three teams, but I've gone with San Jose.
That's wild. I think I've got one San Jose player.
You only have one San Jose player?
I have one San Jose
God,
player.
that's cruel.
Yeah, there he is. Um, funny enough, I've also gone with the one player that I have in my team, but I am throwing it back to 1996, baby.
Oh, we're on the same wavelength.
We are. I'm rocking the San Jose Clash 1996 logo scarf. It is super nice. I got a little Clash logo on the side there. I am loving these 1996 scarf releases that they have. I think they are so sick. So I am looking at getting more, of course, because we do MLS history. We love MLS history. But yeah, I've got one player from this team, and I just needed an excuse to show it off because I've had it for like 2 weeks and nobody's seen
Yeah, you didn't want to wait any longer, just in case. Just
Correct. I
collecting
just couldn't
stuff.
help myself.
I don't
All
blame
right.
you.
So
Get a
I
new
think,
scarf. You show it off.
yeah, correct. I think what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and each read off our first team, 1 through 11, and then we will talk about any differences we have, any arguments we might have. I'll probably call you dumb for a lot of things that you do. And then we'll explain why we have them there. Connor, what shape are you in?
So I tried to keep a shape across all three teams and just kind of keep it vague in some positions. So I set it up in a 4-2-3-1. I tried to keep it vague in that in the two spot in the formation. Um, I tried to keep it vague with either like 6-8 can go either way, someone center mid CDM, and then in the three across attacking role, I just kind of labeled it as like attacking mid. It doesn't have to be like someone's on the left, someone's on the right. It's just three players across like an attacking mid or like winger role, something across the lines, and then a separate spot for striker. But I will say for the third team, I changed it slightly. And I'll talk a little bit about it more when we get to the third team, but I just figured with the personnel that was left available to choose, I had to tweak the formation a little bit because it made the most sense to me to get the guys in that I wanted to get in. But for the first team, I have it in 4-2-3-1.
Okay. All three of my teams are in a 4-1-2-1-2 wide because I broke out the good old IBSL or math IBSL IA
Oh
sheet.
God.
I went
Of
in and
course you
did
did.
did
You're
all of
such
my
a loser.
stats, all of my stats, and utilized numbers to pick the players in my teams. That sheet is set up in a 4-1-2-1-2 diamond with the outside mids. So I went and changed my players to that. That being said, I also took into account the logistics behind the, I guess, mathematical approach to it, and overrode some decisions that it made because and I'll be honest with you, for the most part, I think it was spot on. It was really, really good. I was happy with it. But there were some where I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Specifically in the attacking roles. I need to refine that analysis a little bit more. But for the defensive roles, I think it's really, really good. So um I'm gonna let you go first. I want to know what your team is first.
I think it's funny how yours is like so in-depth analysis and mine was just strictly using the I don't know if you know the function on FBref, but they have this like really cool function where you can compare the players' statistics to the like I guess the rest of the people who qualify in the league. I think it's like you need maybe 900 minutes or something to qualify, and they'll give you like a percentile. I'm sure you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, I've seen it before.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was basing to determine mine. I feel like it's just a really good way to compare how they were statistically across the league. And I think I do want to mention also, this isn't necessarily for you, just for the people listening. Like we're trying to cover like almost, I don't even know how many teams we're up to now. I'll just say almost 30 teams. And obviously, we're not able to watch these teams every week. So if you're watching a specific team, you will have more knowledge on them than we will. I think we just have to go off the statistics. So there's parts of the game that I think we're not going to be able to take into account because we're only looking at like the box score. So bear with us here. Like you may disagree, but that's totally fair. It's just everybody's their own opinion. With
Sure.
that being said, I will give you my first team. So I'll start back to front and up top. So in goal for me, Roman Berkey. Then left back, across to right back. I have Duan Jones at left back. I have Rodriguez at center back, Yerson Mosquera, and Carlos Acapo at right back. In the two center mid spots, I have Edward Leuven, and I went with Aiden Morris. And then in the attack, I went for Denny Bouanga, Lucia Costa, Thiago Almada, and then at striker, I've gone for Cucho.
All right, read back your defenders again.
Okay, I'll go left back to right back again.
Yeah.
Are you typing it? Is that why?
Yeah, because I'm gonna put
All
a
right,
tweet
I'll
out
go
after
slower.
this.
I'll go
I'm gonna put
slower.
a tweet out that says these were our players that we've picked and get some feedback on it. So I've got Berkey, I've got Jones, Rodriguez, Mosquera.
Yep. And then Carlos Acapo.
Oh, a Capo.
Yeah.
Okay. Then keep going.
And then the two midfielders, I've got Leuven
Leuven.
and Aiden Morris.
Okay.
And then let me know when you're ready for attack.
Yeah, I'm keep going. Yeah.
Attackers, I've gone Denny Bouanga, Lucia Costa, and Thiago Almada.
Okay, and then Cucho up top.
Cucho up top.
All right, we're relatively close. Our back line and our defenders are a bit off.
Yeah, I knew that was as soon as you were talking about San Jose, I knew we were not going to be on the same wavelength there.
No,
but we could definitely talk about that one afterwards because I wonder if did you get statistics from more people than outside of your three teams?
Yeah, of course I did.
So I'm curious if you had stats for them where they kind of fit.
Yeah, I can definitely pull those up. Let me give you mine.
Yeah.
In goal, I've got Roman Berkey as well. At right back, I've got Shaq Moore. Ooh. Center back, I've got Michael Boxall from Minnesota.
Michael Boxall.
I'll explain. God. I'll always explain. Matt Miazga as my second center back with Diego Palacios at left back. In my lone defensive midfielder, I've got Artur from Houston. In my attacking mid spot, I've got Thiago Almada, and this is where my shape lets me down in compared to yours because you've got a lot of those attacking mids just thrown in there, which is totally fair. On the left side of my team, I've got Denny Bouanga. On the right side, I've got Christian Espinoza. And then my two strikers are Hani Mukhtar and Cucho Hernandez. So just to talk about Roman Berkey here, you know where we're going. I know where you're going. You know where I'm going. Our favorite stat.
Oh, our favorite stat.
Our favorite stat. PSXG. Yes. My guy absolutely lit that stat up. The first overall in PSXG, positive 9.2, people. It's positive 9.2. Our loyal listeners will know what a stat, what a number that is. That is 9.2 goals saved above the expected average that he should concede. And I think he was clear by like at least 2 or 3 points in that category.
Yeah, I think so.
And he did it on the second most saves with the 5th best save percentage, 6th best goals against average. And one other stat I really liked, he was the 4th best in defensive actions outside the area. So he was playing sweeper keeper a lot too.
Sweeper, yeah.
I love that. I thought that stat was super, super cool. Bring this over here so that I can check some things. DeJuan Jones. That's a question right there. That was your left back, right?
Yeah.
DeJuan Jones finished. Let me go ahead and just bring it on over here. Relatively low. He and I guess for people who don't know about this spreadsheet I have, I take 10 to 15 key stats. I stress 3 of them by adding a multiplier. So I rank the players how they did in each stat. So minutes, tackles, dribbled by, tackle success rate, interceptions, fouls, clearances, crosses blocked, successful dribbles, passing percentage, and crosses completed. So I take all the data. I rank them 1 to however many I had. I think in this group I had 14. So out of the 14 that I had, I ranked them 1 to 14. And then for the specific ones, so tackle success rate, dribbles completed, and crosses completed, I'll add a stressor. So something that is like, I think this stat is more important for the player that I'm looking for. So I'm going to make this count more. And then I average that all together. And that's how I get my numbers here. Diego Palacios for me finished with a 5.76 average. whereas DeJuan Jones finished with a 9.28, which is only fourth from bottom. He 12th most tackles out of 14, seventh least dribble by, so bang average in terms of defending, 11th best tackle success rate out of 14, ninth most interceptions, second least fouls. So he didn't make a lot of fouls, only ninth in clearances, and 13th in most times dispossessed. So lots of big negatives for me in terms of numbers, which is why I didn't take him.
So I'm curious, with your metrics, do you look at totals? Do you look per 90?
I looked at totals.
Okay. So maybe that's where it hurt Dewan a little bit because he only has like 2,000 minutes played this year, which isn't like super small, but it's small compared to, I'm sure, some other guys who were playing, like Palacios, for example, had almost 300 minutes more than DeJuan Jones. So I think it hurt him a little bit. I'm sure if he had more minutes this season, he'd probably bump up your list. But when I look at his scouting report that FBref puts together, it was very, like, he wasn't 99th percentile on anything, but he was like really good percentile across the board, which is what I liked the most. It was like, 91st percentile in assists, 85th percentile in shot creating actions, 94th percentile in progressive carries. And then he even incorporated some defensive stuff as well. 91st percentile in blocks, 78th percentile in clearances. And when they look at the numbers there, it's on a per 90 basis. So it is kind of like flat across everybody that's qualified. And also, this is just looking at fullbacks. So they'll look just kind of positionally, like where you fit, like with other people in your position. So this isn't like comparing center backs as well and like attackers, because then it would get skewed a bit. But he looked good across the board for me, and that's why I put him in. It wasn't a situation where you look at someone like Brooks Lennon, who obviously I love. I'm an Atlanta guy, so I love Brooks Lennon. But he's like, Brooks Lennon is like dominant in every attacking category, and then you look at the defense and it falls off a cliff. Like it's like 15th percentile is like the highest you'll see in a defensive statistic. So I went with DeJuan Jones because he was just solid across the board. I think we know, even outside of statistics, that DeJuan Jones is a very solid fullback, like across the board. He's a great defender. That's why he's in and around the national team right now. It's not for no reason.
Interesting. Okay. So you then went with Rodriguez and Mosquera.
Yeah.
Rodriguez, I'm gonna hold judgment on. Let that be whatever you take it. I'd like to know your meaning behind Mosquera.
So I think statistically he was pretty solid across the board. I don't think he was like the most dominant center back in the league, but he had strong defensive numbers and he was pretty strong in the attack as well. I mean, that's less important. I don't really focus as much on that, but if it was used as I could use it as a differential if it were really close between people, but he was 86th percentile in tackles, 91st percentile in interceptions, 93rd percentile in aerials won. So statistically per 90, he was really dominant. Plus, he was a consistent center back on the team that is the Supporter Shield winners. So I kind of and put like a number statistic behind like, if their team was good, but I certainly like factored that in a little bit. Like I think if your team did well and you did well in the team to help your team get to that point, I factored that in. So because he was pretty dominant statistically on a team that was Supporter Shield champions, I put him there. I know that you could kind of go either way with him or Miazga. I know you have Miazga in there. I'll reserve judgment on Miazga because, I mean, hint, hint, he's coming up very soon. But I think you can go either way with one of them. I went with Mosquera because his scouting report looked a little bit stronger than Miazga's.
So I definitely wanted a FCC center back in there. He was fantastic when they played against Red Bull when I was there. Very, very good. Great athleticism. He's a very good young, promising. They did really well to extend him. And again, I think this might be another one where his minutes hurt him because I only took people who had over 2,000 minutes, and he just barely crossed that threshold for me.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, because I took everything as a total, he did drop off a little bit. So he was dribbled by the 25th most times out of a total 34. He was 24th in total cards and 33rd in fouls. So when he was in, he was doing a lot of fouling. 24th in clearances, 30th in block shots, um, 29th in passing percentage, and 27th in total offsides won. So to me, I saw a lot more negative in there where he has tons of upside. He's a very good second defender, third defender for this group. But to me, Matt Miazga was the guy. Least dribble by player, best tackle success rate, sixth least fouls committed, seventh most clearances, 10th most headers won, 10th most block shots. That to me is, I mean, Matt Miazga right now is in conversation to be defender of the year, and rightfully so. The dude was an absolute beast. He dominated everything, and the only thing he couldn't dominate was the New York Red Bulls and the Tom Barlow. Tom Barlow absolutely, like, Tom Barlow got home, emptied his pockets, and Matt Miazga fell out. Like, it was wild. No, Matt Miazga to me has done exactly what we said he was supposed to do when he was rumored to make the move back. Remember we did that episode? We're like, oh, what does this mean? He has to come in and be an MLS Best 11 center back. Get back into the national team. This is the way to do it. He has done everything right. I believe he deserves to be in the first team. I heard you're going to reserve judgment, so let me talk about Michael Boxall.
Wait, really quick before we talk about Boxall, while we're on the topic of Miazga and Mosquera, I do want to mention, it sounds like from the statistics that you're reading off, and I'm sure FCC fans can give us some more information on it, but it almost sounds like Mosquera is like the aggressive center back that's going up and trying to like kind of almost like the first point of contact. And then Miazga is kind of the staying back and cleaning up anything that gets by Mosquera. Just kind of based off of the statistics, it sounded like that because, you know, like more fouls, more cards, like more times dribbled pass. Maybe it sounds like Mosquera's kind of being more aggressive, trying to engage earlier on, and then Miazga sits back, and maybe that's why Miazga is not dribbled past as much because he's sitting deeper and he's kind of cleaning up anything that gets by Mosquera.
Totally fair. No, absolutely fair. But again, as you mentioned in the intro to what we're doing here, we're only going off numbers here, and this is what my
Yeah.
numbers tell me. So, totally fair. Don't disagree with you. Michael
Okay.
Boxall.
Yeah, Michael, tell me about Michael Boxall.
Fifth least dribble by player, second best tackle success rate. Those two right there are very big. Tackle success rate is my most stressed stat at a times two multiplier. And when you have 34 players, as soon as you dip below like 15, that times two multiplier takes a big chunk out of you. So there were players who were relatively good who had a really bad tackle success rate. Yamar Gomez Andrade is a great example of that, who is good pretty much everywhere except the amount of times he got beat on the dribble, and his passing percentage. And now he's not included in our top three. Spoiler alert. Michael Boxall, second best tackle success rate, fifth least dribble by player, fifth most interceptions, and the most blocked shots. Those are the big key ones that I took away. But as well, from that, 11th in tackles total, eighth most clearances, 11th passing percentage, and 18th total offside ones. So he's kind of mid there, but the key ones again. So when I put this whole spreadsheet together way back in 20, oh gosh, what was that? 2012 we made this? 2013?
Oh God, let's not
Goodness
try and figure
me.
out the year.
This is probably a decade old spreadsheet now, which is really cool. What a flex. When I put this together, it was with the idea of how do I get the ideal player for my team? And my ideal player was somebody who won the ball in the air, was successful in 1v1 challenges and tackling, was strong in possession, and then was able to read passing lanes, cut passing lanes, read attackers, and intercept the ball. So that's where my stress stats come from: headers won, interceptions, and tackle success rate. Everything else is, just stuff I think center backs should be able to do, and it's included in there. But those are the big ones for me. So if you're very, very good in those three, then you are good for me. So that is where Michael Boxall fits in for my first team all MLS.
Okay. His scouting report is not super great on here. So, I mean, I'm sure it's not a big spoiler, but he's definitely not in my teams anywhere.
Yeah, but you also hated on Marcelo Silva last year, and now you look silly. So
Do I look silly?
yeah. Talk to me about your left back. Is it Akapo from San Jose? Is that right?
You mean right back?
Is it right back?
Yeah.
Okay, talk to me
I don't
about
know
your
how to
right back.
pronounce it. If it's Akapo or Akapo or
I'm thinking it's a capo. That sounds.
we're probably wrong. Let's just be honest. We're probably wrong. I imagine if you did take statistics for him, he probably was not great in your list because he literally just hit the 2K mark. He had 2,056 minutes. So if you're looking at totals and stuff, he's not going to rank very well up there. But he is very similar to DeJuan Jones in that he was just really well rounded percentile wise across the board. I mean, I think maybe a little bit different than DeJuan Jones. I think he was heavier defensively than he was offensively because he was 95th percentile in interceptions, 95th percentile in clearances, 93rd percentile in aerials won, 82nd percentile in tackles. I mean, he was statistically per 90, he was dominant at right back. Like he was fantastic defensively. And maybe that's a product of the system or whatever. I don't know. I don't watch San Jose every week. I mean, I don't really watch San Jose at all, to be honest, even though I'm backing them this season. But yeah, he was dominant defensively and while he wasn't super dominant going forward, I mean, he still was able to contribute. I mean, he was 82nd percentile in progressive carries. He was 86th percentile in successful take-ons. He was 79th percentile in non-penalty goals, 90th percentile in shots total. So really solid defensively at the back, and then was able to contribute a bit going forward. I mean, it seemed like he was just super well rounded and had a really strong season. Just, I'm guessing statistically on your lists, he's not going to rank probably very well because he probably was like, I mean, maybe 1,000 minutes, almost 1,000 minutes less than other people like that. That'll definitely hurt him on your chart.
So, my 2,000 minutes was only for the center backs. The right backs and left backs needed 1,500, so he got in
That
there
makes
no
sense.
problem. Um, Also, my stats only include when they played in that position. So if he played in the center back role or as a left back at times, it didn't count. So I have him at 1903 minutes. And funny enough, he actually is the first guy out, second guy out of my stats. So he averaged an 8.21 when my third team guy averages 7.86. So he's right in the mix. Him and looks like maybe Jake Nerwinski. Is that
Jake Nerwinski.
no DJ Taylor, another Minnesota boy.
You like your
Um,
Minnesota boys. Are
listen,
you sure they're your enemy of the pod?
I have to be nice, man. I slandered them. They're gonna miss the playoffs because I slandered them. I got to be nice now. No, so he's right up there for me. He's got decent stats in good areas. So third most successful dribbles, which is a stress stats. Third most crosses block. Second most clearances. First most interceptions. Fifth best tackle success rate. Like I said, he was right in there. Just the guys I had were first and second at pretty much every go there. Did I talk about Shaq Moore already?
No.
And did I talk about Diego Palacios? I can't remember.
You might have briefly talked about Palacios.
Okay, well, let's go through them both again because you've hit all of your defenders.
Yep. Here.
Shaq Moore for me, most tackles, best tackle success rate, most crosses blocked, second most successful dribbles, second most accurate long balls, fourth most crosses completed. Shaq Moore, an absolute tank of a human being. Basically top percentile. He just beat out my number two guy. Him and the number two guy basically went back and forth, but that tackle success rate again being a double stress stat really helped him out because the guy who finished in the second place spot, who I'm not going to spoil, see how I'm being smart about that, was in sixth in that category, and that double multiplier brought him down. But again, I think it's a really good shout. I think Nashville have been really, really good. we know that they're always defensively sound, but he's also been really good going forward as well, right? So I don't think it's a bad spot here for Shaq. I think it's well deserved. Another guy who needed to come back and get his career going um, after being kind of a bench guy, bench rotation guy in Spain. So happy for him. Think he's done really well, very deserving of it. Diego Palacios, same deal. Most tackles, second best tackle success rate, most interceptions, second most crosses blocked, sixth most successful dribbles, best passing percentage. Um, you know, all over the shop, this Diego Palacios lad was. Um, a 5.77 average when the next closest guy was 6.24. Um, yeah, very, very strong in those areas where, again, the guy who finished below him probably got hurt because he was in the stress stats. Palacios was better in all three. So that's where he separates himself. I really liked Diego Palacios from day one since he's been in MLS with LAFC, and I think he has just solidified himself as one of the best left backs in the league, especially with Kai Wagner now on the way out. Somebody needs to step up and take that role. I think Diego Palacios is that guy. Now, I'm not. I just want to put it out there. I am not making that prediction in our preseason prediction rankings, which means that whatever jinx or whatever people think that I am putting on teams or players, it does not apply with what I just said. So do not come for me if it turns out that way.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with you fully on Palacios. I mean, I'm not spoiling anything, so I'm not going to comment on anything more than that.
Great. What I do want you to comment on is your pick for Aiden Morris at um, center mid. You got there,
Yeah, I figured that
and
one
and
might be.
Leuven.
Leuven was an easy one for me. I mean, he was, in my opinion, the engine for St. Louis this season. I think he made things happen for them, especially going forward. In his percentiles were, I mean, fantastic going forward. I mean, you will find guys who played in that midfield position who will look more dominant in the attack, like Ricky Puig. But the things that put Leuven ahead for me was that he also did some work defensively, and like not just little bits. Like he has solid defensive numbers from what I'm seeing here. But going forward, I mean, he was 97th percentile in shots total, 98th percentile in assists, 97th percentile in shot creating actions versus midfielders, which it's basically 8-6, I think is what it's comparing. So this isn't including like attacking midfielders. So if I'm sure if you include that, he would drop percentile wise, but I think it makes sense to compare him to other midfielders. I think he was probably in the 8 role most often. In terms of like passing and ball control, 98th percentile in successful take-ons, 93rd percentile in progressive passes. I mean, that and the shot creating actions to me said a lot that he was getting the attack going. Like he was the engine making things happen in the attack. And then, like I said before, he wasn't a slug on defense. He was not someone who was just not going to track back. He was 88th percentile in blocks, 68th percentile in tackles, uh, 63rd percentile in clearances. Like I don't necessarily think that he was tasked with like the guy that's got to drop back and make all the defensive plays, and yet he was still really solid in those numbers. I mean, he's not one of those guys that's like can't get above the 10th percentile in any of those defensive statistics. So I really liked the fact that he was so well rounded, and I thought he was super, super crucial to St. Louis being as successful as they were. But I probably spent too much time on him because I know Aiden Morris is probably the more controversial one. Uh, but his statistics look so good this year, like pretty well rounded across the board. I probably could have put somebody else ahead of Aiden Morris here, but I liked how well rounded he looked in the attack. Nothing like too crazy in terms of his percentiles. There's nothing where he's like 90th percentile or anything, but he was solid across the board, like 71st percentile in shot creating actions and 73rd percentile in non-penalty goals. So he was still contributing. He was really good with passing, 98th percentile in pass completion percentage and 94th percentile in passes attempted. So he was really on the ball a lot, making a lot of good passes. And then was able to contribute as well defensively a little bit. 95th percentile in tackles and 85th percentile in interceptions. I really liked the fact that he was well rounded across the board. And I felt like the 8-6 rule, like there weren't a ton of guys that were jumping off the page for me. Like there's obviously like there's a couple of guys who are really good in attack, really poor in defense, and vice versa. But I really like the guys that are well rounded, and Aiden Morris kind of just fit that based on his scouting report.
Okay, so I've got more controversy for you,
Okay.
and I will explain why after I say it. So
Okay.
we can get a sound clip, and then I'll explain it, and we can get some engagement. Edward Leuven is the worst ranked center mid in my sheet, and here's why.
Okay.
I have a very specific threshold for defensive center mids and attacking center mids, and it really, really minimizes the impact of proper number eights like you brought in with Leuven, who, and that's exactly who he is. So I am not disagreeing with your selection of Leuven in the slightest, but in my shape, where I have a proper number 6 and a proper number 10, Edward Leuven does not cut the bill for either.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, your formation, he has no like you're not taking out a number 10 to put Leuven in there. And he doesn't do enough in defense that you could put him as a 6. So I get that. It's just I that's why I kept it vague because like I'm not sending out a team that's necessarily going to win games. I'm just putting together who I think is the best relatively around those positions.
Right, and that's what I'm doing. My team is statistically set up to be very good in a very specific play style that I like to run. So, hold
Well,
on.
how dare you have your own opinion? You can
Yeah,
only have the opinion of the person who is currently typing out the angry message to us right now.
love it. And then Aiden Morris was very close. Aiden Morris was quick look here. Aiden Morris was next guy in to my final 6, so he was 7. So very, very close. I liked Aiden Morris a lot. Next year, he's going to be fantastic.
Yeah,
But
he got
again,
that breakout year we were expecting from him this year. Great
yeah,
year from him.
yeah. But he did a lot of work for Columbus, which involved him playing forward more. So he was dispossessed 18th most out of 28, which really hurt him. Very good in interceptions, mid in his tackle success rate, which is fine. 30th most dribbled by player. That's what got him. If he sticks, because he had the most tackles won. He was a fantastic defender, but he also got beat the most, which is why his tackle success rate is relatively mid. But if he comes in next year and continues to tackle the way he does, and then he doesn't even need to win the ball, but if he can just force them to go backwards a quarter more of the time, this dude's first team, no question. So, for me, the guy who did it was Artur. So Artur for Houston has been an absolute rock. 5th most tackles of all the defensive mids I looked at. 4th least dribbled by player. The best tackle success rate of all of them. The 5th most interceptions. The 5th best passing percentage. And again, when you're top 5 out of 34 in all the key stats that I look at, you're that's not an anomaly, right? This dude's an absolute stud. There's a reason that Benny loves him so much, and there's a reason Houston are the way they are this year. He was such a big part of that, and I think we knew about this when he was with Columbus. He was the same way, and then he had that injury, and he didn't get back to it. Didn't get back to it. And now he's finally fully there. This dude is a fantastic number 6. The dude is a massive piece for Houston, and I truly think that Houston go as far as they want, as they will go through the playoffs as far as Artur will take them. Artur is the engine. He is the runner. He is the man for Houston.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to argue there because I'm gonna reserve judgment. But surprisingly, I don't want to say surprisingly because I don't think he's good, but surprisingly in that it felt quiet that he was just quietly really solid back there.
I will tell you, if he plays in LA, New York, Miami, this dude's the most talked about player in the league.
Oh, we talk about him like we talk about Gaston Brugman.
Yep, 100%. It is wild. So I am very excited that his stats brought him there because he deserved it, right? Um, I think we're relatively good as we go forward here. So, again, I think it's more of a shape reason for any of our disagreements for the pieces as we go forward. We both have Buanga, who leads the Golden Boot, right? Most dribbles completed. I mean, you just watch him play, and we know
He
what he
had to
looks like,
be.
right?
He had to be in there. That was not a question.
Yeah. Then you've got Cucho Hernandez, 15th in goals. He made up 23% of Columbus's goals this year. One of every 4 goals Columbus scored was from Cucho Hernandez. 11 assists as well, which is the same number as Hani Mukhtar, who people are just bawling their eyes out over to be an MVP candidate. Cucho has the same exact numbers in 500 minutes less. Where is his conversation in this? I mean,
I
goodness me.
honestly, I could not believe how strong of a season Kucho had because I just heard nothing. Like I remember when Kucho first came in and he was lighting it up and he was constantly the talk of every conversation. It was like Kucho Hernandez. And then it was like he maybe he got a little cold towards the end of the last season. Maybe it was a little slow to start things up this season. And then just nobody talked about him. I mean, maybe the messy stuff doesn't help, but he has been quietly so good this season across the board. Like even like you said, outside of just scoring goals, he's already been solid there. But then 11 assists is crazy from a striker. That's so well rounded.
It's unbelievable. And again, Hani is a different beast because he's very withdrawn a lot. He plays as a striker, but he drops off consistently. Um, but Hani makes up 38% of Nashville's goals. So once again, Nashville go as far as Hani take him, right? I also had Thiago Almada in there, most fouls drawn, second most goals, most dribbles completed, key passes, second best passing percentage, most assists. I mean, the list goes on, right? We know about Thiago Almada. That is not a um, it's not a
You don't have to argue to get him in.
thank you. I was trying to think about the right way to put it in.
Yeah.
And then the last one I have again, because you don't really have a right winger, you have more attacking midfielders. Christian Espinoza, dude. Third most shots, second most goals, second most dribbles completed, most crosses completed, most assists. The dude's scoring goals. He's a great fantasy option, by the way. 13 million fantasy. So no, the dude again, San Jose running through Christian Espinoza, especially the early part of the year when they got hot, early. Espinoza was their guy. So definitely very well deserving, I think. Again, I think our attackers are pretty good. Our defenders are what we're going to need to talk about. So, um, any
I don't
disagreements
want
to
to
something I said?
I don't want to take the spotlight away in case you're going to talk about him soon, and I sure hope you do. But a little bit surprised to not see Lucia Costa in there because I mean, maybe statistically he might have been like a little bit worse than the other ones, but I feel like you got to factor in some weight that he's basically the face of the team that won the supporter shield this year. I mean
So,
it was hard for me. Like he was one of the first names I had in my team sheet, and statistically he was super strong as well. I mean, maybe not as strong as some other players, but he was certainly strong enough in my opinion to be in the first team. And I know the shape doesn't necessarily work with how you have it set up, but
well, and that's exactly it. Is my shape took away from his ability to be here, right? Um, Thiago Almada statistically just better than him in every key statistic that I looked at.
I
He
won't
just
argue with
was.
that on that one. I'm biased towards Thiago
I
Almada.
and you could, and I would defend it. Like, and I hate giving your players praise. However, you take Lucia Costa out of Cincinnati, I think that they fare better than if you take Thiago Almada out of Atlanta.
Yeah,
You take
I
both of
don't
those guys out.
disagree.
I think FCC are a better team without him than Almada is, which means that Almada did more on his own as a player than Lucci did, which also helped flip things. I mean, statistically, it wasn't really even close. It was it was 2.96 to 5.67. Like it wasn't really close, but because of the way I set things up. However, we'll move on to team two and I can explain more.
Yeah, I imagined he was going to be there. But
Yeah.
should we go to team two?
It was like this, right? It was like that. I'll move on to
It's
team two.
hard. There's a group of attacking players that it's like somebody's got to be left off somewhere.
Well, and this is why we need more than just one team. Imagine trying to pick between all of these attacking midfielders for one position or at most two positions.
Yeah,
That's
but you're still
ridiculous.
picking for the best team. I'm sure the guys that end up on the second team, they may not be happy that they're on the second team. They want to be on the first team. But anyway, should we move on to the second team?
We shall, and you can start us off.
Sure. If you're gonna jot it down, just tell me when
I
you're
am
good
gonna jot it
afterwards.
down, but let me get ready for it. Okay,
Yeah.
I am ready.
All right. I'll start at the back again. So in goal for me, I've got Daniel. Then
Yes, you do.
left back to right back, I have got Diego Palacios. I've got Yamar. I've got Matt Miazga. And I've got Brandon Bai. Then
Okay.
in the two midfield spots, I've got Hector Herrera and Obina Nwobodo.
I'm good. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for confirmation. Three attacking spots. I've gone for Carl's Heel, Hani Mukhtar, and Christian Espinosa. And
Okay.
then at striker, I've gone for Julian Carranza.
Ooh. Okay. And we'll talk about that. We have lots of differences here,
That's
and
fine.
I will need to explain a lot of
Oh boy,
a
here
lot
we
of
go.
a lot of things because there are
Here we
some things
go.
there's some things here we need to talk about. All right. So in goal, Joe Willis. At right back, Brooks Lennon. Center backs, Zach McGraw from Portland and Rodriguez from San Jose. Left back, Nuhu Tolo, my boy Nuhu. At the 6 role, I've gone with Keaton Parks. At the 10 role, we've got Luciano Acosta. And here's where I need to explain things. When I looked at things, anybody who played in a 5-back as an outside back was considered a left mid, left wing player because they were more attacking than they were defensive. So at left wing, I've got Alvaro Barreal.
I knew you were going
At
with
the
that as soon as you started the
yeah,
explanation.
at the right wing, I've gone with Bongi Hlongwane from Minnesota. And then the two strikers in this shape are Georgios Giacomakis and our Lord and Savior Brian White. Brian White in the second team because of goat things. Just a note on Joe Willis here, and then you can tell me all about your completely not biased pick of your
What are you
goalkeeper of the
talking about?
year in the
There's no
second
proof of
spot.
bias. No proof.
Yeah, I don't need proof to figure it out, homie. All right. So I've got Joe Willis here, who was the 6th most saves out of what I do. I cut it in half, didn't I? So out of 13. So 6 out of 13. Second best save percentage, second best goals against average, fifth most shutouts, fifth in our favorite stat, PSXG plus minus. And he was joint third in least goals conceded for anybody who had over 1,800 minutes. So thought it was very good. Again, goalkeepers are funny to look at because your defense plays a big role in how successful you are. But I think Joe Willis, as always, is a solid choice. You can feel his absence when he's not there. And he performed really, really well in all of the stats that we had. So
I'm not. So here's the thing. I'm not going to be able to comment on a lot of yours because we're more similar than you think. We're just a little bit different.
no,
So
I'm okay with that. We don't need to drag this out for 4 hours.
yeah. So I will.
Just talk to me about
Save.
Daniel.
Yeah. Let's just go. Let's just jump right into it. Like, why waste time when we can talk about our favorite ever statistic in PSXG plus minus? Because Daniel is number 2 in that stat behind Roman Berkey. I mean,
That's the
Roman
only.
Berkey
That's
was
I. So hold on. I'm going to cut you off because I could have told you if you told me 3 weeks ago we were doing this episode and we were picking 3 goalkeepers. All I would have had to do was go on to FBref, look at the top 3 PSXG plus minus, and just pick those 3 because that is how you run goalkeepers. I knew that was going to happen. God,
it's
you're
not the
so
only thing I look at.
boring.
It's not the only thing I look at. Believe me.
But it's the most important thing. You're
It is.
boring, dude.
To me, it's the most individual stat for a goalkeeper. I think other things can be influenced by their defense in front of them. You look at clean sheets and clean sheet percentage, there's 4 other, I mean, forget 4. There's essentially 10 other people on the field who influence that stat, but it's like PSXG plus minus is strictly the goalkeeper. Like that's just
Well,
how much they are
let
able
me
to
ask you
individually
something.
influence.
Let me ask you something. If a goalkeeper has a low PSXG plus minus because their defense is so good that they only get easy shots, and the goals that they don't save are the ones they shouldn't save anyway, does that not influence anything?
Well,
I
if
mean,
it's
we can argue the semantics of statistics all day long. Please continue on anything else about Daniel other than the fact that he had a good
no,
PSXG plus minus.
you came from my favorite statistic. I have to defend it.
You have to defend.
If they're not saving shots that shouldn't be savable, it's not going to hurt their PSXG plus minus because the XG is
Correct.
going to be like it's not going to hurt that much. But if they let in a soft one that they should save, that's where it'll hurt them. So I feel like even if they're not like, yes, I guess it could potentially hurt them if they're facing less shots overall because they just have less time to accumulate more PSXG plus minus. But that again, like I tried to look at other things besides that. That's obviously, I'm sure if you've listened to this podcast enough, you know that that's like my go-to statistic for it. And because I don't feel like we should discredit the goalkeepers that have to do more work. Like they're doing more to help their team. And just because, like, I don't think it should hurt a goalkeeper if they're not getting as many shots, but I also don't think we should just disregard a goalkeeper that's putting in more work and doing a lot more because their defense sucks. So, like Daniel, if you look at him statistically, like clean sheet wise, he's not very high up there. He only has a 24% clean sheet percentage and only 5 clean sheets. Some of that is because he didn't play the full season. JT Marcinkowski got some games as well. He only had 21 appearances, about 1,900 minutes, but he was 4th highest in save percentage. I mean, he's essentially exactly the same in save percentage as Joe Willis. And per 90 saves, he's got much more than Joe Willis. I definitely think in that regard, Joe Willis is benefiting from better defense. And same thing with the clean sheet percentage. So it's a close conversation, but I think in the individual statistics, I liked Daniel a bit more than Joe Willis. But like I said, I'm reserving judgment on Joe Willis, and I'm sure that gives away stuff, but I'm reserving judgment.
Daniel was 6th in my stats.
I'm surprised he even made your stats because he didn't have a ton of minutes.
So he made where'd he
Less
go?
than 2K minutes.
Yeah, it was 1856. 1800 was my cutoff, so he was in.
Okay.
9th most saves. 10th,
yeah, but that's because he barely
10th,
made it on the list.
right. 10th out of 14 in goals against average, which is a stress stat.
Yeah.
14th in shutouts, right? He
Yeah.
was.
I mean, that's going to
He
hurt him
wasn't.
because
Yeah, like I said, he was great in PSXG. He was great in save percentage. He was great in passing percentage. So there are things that he did well, but there are other things that he did not do so well.
yeah, and I think in my opinion, those things were probably not his fault. But that's just me.
I wonder why. Predicted him for goalkeeper.
Well,
of the year.
he's not winning the award. All right, let's just say that. He's not winning it, but I think he should be in the conversation. He's not going to win it though. It's clear who's winning the award. We already talked about him. But anyway, should we talk about the defense?
Yeah. So I went with Brooke Lennon here. Brooks Lennon, excuse me. He actually is better defensively than you would expect. So third least dribble by player. And now that I think about it, maybe that number there is because he was so far forward, people
Yeah,
just
he's like in the
never had the
box. How do
chance
you
to
get dribbled by in the box? The
maybe.
goalkeeper is the
But
only one that could dribble by him.
anyways, sixth best tackle success rate. So when he is going in for challenges, fifth most interceptions, first most clearances, fifth most successful dribbles, second best passing percentage, most accurate short balls, and most crosses completed. So very good in important areas. But he was poor in things like crosses blocked, times dispossessed, um, which brought him down again just a little bit lower than Shaq Moore, not significantly. Um, so I was happy putting him here in the two spot. I think he's earned that with his ability to play forward, which is always a key part of my outside backs in my system. But also he's been more decent than most people think defensively.
He was the first guy out for me on my teams. He was
Okay.
number 4. Because, and I think this is just because we were looking at different defensive statistics. As I already mentioned, like I think it's very obvious with Brooks Lennon. If you watched him at all, you know that he just bombs for. I mean, he started as a winger. Like he was a winger before he became a fullback. So his tendency, of course, is going to be to get really far forward, and he's always involved in the attack, and it's definitely super helpful for the team. But he doesn't he doesn't do a lot defensively. I mean, you talked about tackle success rate, but in terms of number of tackles, he had 1.13 per 90, which was 13th percentile out of fullbacks. So he might be winning a lot, but he doesn't really go in for a lot of tackles, it seems.
I
Interceptions
had
was
him.
also
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you out there. I had him middle of the pack basically. I had him 8 out of 15,
that
8 out of
probably is
16. Excuse me.
that's probably because he played 2,900 minutes this season. I
Also
bet he
fair.
would
Like
be
I said,
lower if he was per 90.
I would love to redo this with and you know I will, by the way, because I don't have anything else better to do. I'm gonna redo this as a per 90 and see what it looks like.
It shouldn't take too long to do it per 90. Just divide everything by 90.
Oh, I was talking
You,
about per game.
you can come
Anyways, go
back to
on.
your statistic anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he, in terms of your statistics, I definitely think he benefited by playing 2,900 minutes this season. And from what I'm seeing from a lot of fullbacks, they did not play nearly that much. They were like 2,300, even like 2,000. So that definitely helps him. But per 90, his defensive statistics were pretty low, except clearances. He was 67th percentile in clearances. But I mean, yeah, I know his role is to go forward and be in the attack, and he does it very well. So I have no problems with him being in there because he serves his purpose pretty much exactly how you would want him to.
Okay. Let's go to left back then, and then we'll go into the middle. Nuhu for me, seventh in tackles, and let me pull up really quick the number of players that I have here out of 14. So seventh in tackles, fourth least dribble by, fifth best tackle success rate, most clearances, fourth most crosses blocked, second most successful dribbles in the attacking phase, fifth least dispossessed, second best passing percentage, third most passes total. So he was passing the ball and passing it well. Um, Again, Diego Palacios was just better in pretty much every stat that we just listed there, but he was pretty good in most of the other ones. So, again, I think Nuhu has been again one of the better left backs in the league for near half a decade now, probably. Um, this isn't a shock to me. Seattle's been good. They've been. What are we at here? We're looking at in terms of their defensive abilities. They're one of the more defensively stout teams here with,
Yeah, they're very solid defensively.
yeah, what are they at? I'm just going to get a number here. 32 goals against, which I believe
That is best in the Western Conference.
best in the West and one less than our friends in Nashville who are at 31. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't shock me that I've got a lot of Seattle defenders in here. I think they've been really, really good.
Yeah, I got to see it live. Not to brag.
Wow.
I'm not going to add too much more on Palacios because you covered it a lot in the first team. But yeah, I mean he in my opinion he's right there 1-2 with DeJuan Jones. I think for me Palacios was a little bit lower attacking wise than I was kind of expecting him to be. Is a lot of his per 90 percentiles were a little bit low in the attack. I mean, he was still pretty good in shot creating action, 76 percentile, but it almost feels like once he got into the final third, he wasn't involved as much. Really not involved in the goals and assists. And obviously that's not super important. He's a fullback. Like he's not supposed to be getting the goals and assists. Uh, but I think DeJuan Jones was a little bit better there. And I felt he was a bit more well-rounded. Uh, Very involved in the build-up, had 97 percentile in passes, attempted and 92nd percentile in progressive passes. And then was surprising. Actually, no, not surprising, but was really, really solid defensively in terms of certain statistics. His tackles, he was 99th percentile in tackles, 99th percentile in interceptions, 86th percentile in blocks. I think he was clear at least number two for me at the left back spot. And I am very much open for the conversation of him being in the first team as well. But I put him just below DeJuan Jones in the second team.
Okay. Brandon By
Yeah,
is
Brandon By was never going to stand a chance in your statistics because he did not have a ton of minutes this year. I think
yeah,
he's probably
that's what it seems like.
I think he probably just qualified for your list because he has just over 1,500 minutes. But like compare him to Brooks Lennon, he has 1,200 less minutes than Brooks Lennon. He was never going to stand a chance to beat out Brooks Lennon for a spot here because he only had like 16,000 or sorry, 1,665 minutes. But
Yeah.
I don't think he was anything like crazy otherworldly, but I just again it felt like a similar situation in DeJuan Jones. He was just solid in my opinion across the board per 90. He was dominant in the air, 90th percentile in aerials one, 86th percentile in clearances. So he was good in some statistics defensively. He was not as good in some of the other ones, but in terms of helping with the build-up, 74th percentile in progressive carries, 68th percentile touches, and then in the attack as well, 86th percentile, sorry, 84th percentile in non-penalty goals. And I don't even want to try and say whatever the statistic is, but he's like 82nd percentile in non-penalty XG plus
You need to
XAG.
relax with you.
It's I don't determine what's in the statistics that pop up in the scouting report, but I just in my opinion, I think he was pretty solid across the board. I would definitely be open if someone made a good conversation about moving him a bit lower, but he was solid in my opinion, and I think he played just enough minutes for me to consider him.
Interesting. Moving into the six role for me.
Wait, did we talk about
Uh,
center backs?
no, you're right. We didn't. Rodriguez, I think you touched on him a little bit before. Most tackles won, third most interceptions, fifth most clearances, seventh most block shots, most headers won. The dude all over the place, right? You're great defender. I'm not going to add too much on him. Zach McGraw was an interesting one in my little list here, and I really was happy to see somebody different because that's how these things roll. So let me just pull up this guy's stats here. Eighth most tackles, ninth best tackle success rate, most clearances, sixth most block shots, fifth most headers won, 10th most offsides won. And again, a lot of those are in important stressed areas, right? The headers one is stressed, interceptions is stressed. He was 11th in there. And then tackle success rate being ninth. So in the stress stats, he was very good, and that's what brought him in there again for how I want to play my system. He checks all the boxes for me where I'd be confident having him around.
Am I allowed to make changes to my team?
You do whatever you want. You're gonna go ahead and take my team. Go right ahead. I don't care.
I do. Zach McGraw looks great. I think I definitely should have had him in here. Um, I kind of figured I saw that he was high on like who scored when I was looking a little bit on who scored. I kind of figured that he was high though because he's very good attacking wise as a center back. And I
Okay.
know that like the attacking numbers really like inflate their ratings and stuff. But his defensive numbers as a center back are fantastic. Like honestly, he might have some of the best defensive statistics for center back in the league. So, I mean, we can keep it however you can put the editing however you want it, but I would drop Yamar from this team and put Zach McGraw there. So I would have McGraw and Matt Miazga,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would just drop uh Yamar to my third team. But I mean, going off of that, I mean, I think you kind of covered everything from McGraw, but even from an FBref scouting report perspective, he's 71st percentile or higher in all of their like five defensive, like I guess key defensive statistics that they list there, like tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, aerials. He was phenomenal. He's very, very good. So I definitely want to get him in there. I would put him second team um, with Miazga. And you already kind of talked about Miazga, but I definitely think Miazga Mosquera was probably, in my opinion, kind of interchangeable. But Mosquera, in terms of the per 90 on the scouting report, was a little bit better in some of those defensive statistics that they listed, the tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, whatever. So that's why I had leaned more towards Mosquera. But again, that could just be a product of the style of play. And you looked at certain other statistics that I think benefited maybe the way that he plays better. So I'm fine either way, flipping one of those two between first team, second team, but I've got Miazga on the second team.
So super interesting. Sorry, we'll kind of go off on a tangent here. I just did not by per 90, but by per game
Mm-hmm.
analysis of the team at the right back spot just for fun. Akapo, Brandon By, and I don't know who your third guy is, but Caligari from LA Galaxy, who you don't know. You don't know that
I
guy
know him now.
exists.
I know him
Oh,
now.
now you know. That's good. Um, we're three players who were then the top of the list. But here's what I'll say. I think to be a part of a best 11, you need to play. You can't like you can't be a guy like Olivier Mbaizo, for example, who splits time with Nathan Harriel. Mbaizo might be ridiculous in the 15 of the 30 games that Philly play. But if he's only playing 15 games, I'm not putting anywhere near my first team. So I
Well,
totally understand the way that you now analyze things. However, I think the minutes played and the total that you have are important.
so would it change for you if rather than missing games because you were rotated out, you missed games because you were injured? Does that change the lack of
No,
minutes perspective to you?
no, not even remotely.
Okay.
Because if you're hurt, here's the other. Let me ask you this then: would it matter if you were transferred out of the league early?
Well,
Your minutes were cut, but you were still fantastic.
I didn't consider any guy that's
Well,
not in the league anymore.
and that's my point, right? Realistically, on my goalkeeper list, Jordy Petrovic was third.
Oh, 100% he's on the list.
Correct. But I didn't put him in because he didn't finish the season.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to play throughout the entire season is a big part of it.
That's fair. I mean, I definitely think I feel like you could set a minutes cutoff at some point, and then you can kind of consider it across the board evenly.
Right. And that's kind of what I did is when I set that minutes cutoff, and maybe it's a touch low, but I mean, I only have 16 right backs in this list. So it's not like I've included everybody, but I also haven't included, you know, not a ton. So I've cut it off at a fair point where I think, okay, if you're in here, I'll include you. It won't throw off our rankings too bad. Like if I brought people in who played 4 games and had like 2 tackles, right? Like, all right, well now everybody has moved up a spot and your average is gonna skew. But for me, I think that the minute cutoff makes it fair to analyze totals. because there are players who have less minutes. So I'll pick Caligari, for example, who is 11th in minutes, but 6th in tackles total. So it's not like it's a complete off the line of that. But that's just me. Anyways, I feel like we're waffling way too much on how we
Oh yeah,
analyze stats and not
this is
talking.
gonna be a super long episode. It's
Th-
because we're
this is
stats nerds.
this has turned into an analysis. This has turned into a statistical analysis and not
This is
a.
our worst nightmare. We should have never done this episode. We're not
I
even
love it.
we didn't even get to the 6-8s yet on the
I,
second team.
so bad. We're so bad. Um. All right. At the sixth spot, I went with Keaton Parks, and the sixth part spot for me was interesting. Because again, I had a lot of really tough calls to make, and it, as we mentioned before, the number eights are kind of out. So Hector Herrera, who you put in, who I think is a great shout, um, doesn't make my team, which hurts because what I need to do is find a way to analyze proper number eights and then pick from there. Um, so we'll go into Keaton Parks, who was in my top six, and I actually I allowed him to jump players to be in this spot because I wasn't sold on a lot of them. So um, Keaton Parks, sixth least dribble by, fifth best tackle success rate, ninth least cards, third most headers won, eighth best passing percentage in a group of what looks to be 30. So top third of most of the key stats there. I've always been a fan of Keaton Parks. I hate watching him play for City because I wish he would play on a real field because he would be so good. But he's a very, very good ball playing number six, and I think he fits into that system really well. So that's my pick for six. But please talk to me about your 8-10s.
I mean, I'll talk to you about my 6-8s.
Go for
Hector
it.
Herrera. I think I didn't touch too much on him in terms of his season, but he was unbelievably good going forward this year. I mean, he's playing a very similar role, or I guess a pretty similar role to Leuven, and that I think he is in that center mid spot, but really pushes forward and is such a key part in the attack. I mean, he was outstanding across the board in terms of percentiles, how he ranks to other midfielders. 98th percentile in shot creating actions, 98th percentile in assists, like 93rd percentile in shots. It was really good with passing as well. 99th percentile in passes attempted, 96th percentile in progressive passes. And the thing that helped me determine to put him in the second team was, while he's definitely not a super strong defender, it looked like he put a little effort into defending, which boosted him ahead of one other player that I put in my third team, which I'll talk about when we get to the third team. But he was
Gotcha.
97th percentile in blocks, which was way higher than I expected. 71st percentile in aerials won, which was shocking to me. I mean, those were his two bigger statistics. I mean, I didn't expect him to be super strong defensively, and he wasn't, but there was more there compared to other players who were kind of in a similar role in terms of like the playmaking, get forward eight in their team. So that's kind of what boosted him a little bit ahead of some of the other guys and got him in the second team for me. And then Nwobodo. So I feel like if you look at the full game for Nwobodo, he's not going to look great because he's not a dominant passer. He's not going to get in the final third and have goals and assists. But what he is brought in to do, he is dominant in. He is fantastic defensively. And that is what he's brought in to do. He's 91st percentile in tackles, 96th percentile in tackles won, 88th percentile in dribblers tackled, 96th percentile in interceptions. I mean, there are statistics across the board defensively that you can look at for him, and he will be high up there. So he was fantastic defensively. And I wanted to highlight that despite the fact that if you look at him in terms of well-roundedness, he's not going to look great. But for what his role is, he was dominant, and I think he deserved to be in one of the top teams because of that.
So I will tell you, Nwobodo for me was right on the bubble, and the thing that let him down was being 20th in times dispossessed, which is a 1.7 modifier for me, which is really big because I do 1.5, 1.7, and 2. That is what brought him down. If he isn't, let me see, if I just put him here as 10, for example. Yeah, if I put him at 10 and he brings his passing percentage up to 15, he's in my team. But the passing percentage, as you mentioned, the passing percentage and that specific stress stat is what brought him down for me. Oh wait,
Yeah, and I get that. I understand that.
Yeah.
Keaton Parks looked way better than I was expecting. He was super well-rounded, had a super strong season.
Yeah, like I said, Keaton's great. But I don't disagree with your choices, by the way. I think Nwobodo is the best defensive midfielder for that role because they pair him with somebody who I'm going to give an honorable mention to in the third team who can do the rest of the work he doesn't need to do. Then you go with Herrera, who, again, Artur is the guy who goes in and does the dirty work. He's a little bit better at the other stuff than Nwobodo is, but he wins the ball, he gives it to Double H and says, go play football. And they do. That, like, you can see that there are pairings there, and these players who are in here are very good in pairings. You leave them as lone sixes, as shown in my group, you might struggle. So, don't disagree with any of your choices. By the way, I think they've been really, really good. So,
oh, thank you.
For now, like I said, you'll mess some things up.
This is way too wholesome.
You'll mess some things up in the third team, I'm sure. I talked about Luciano Acosta as my 10, and I said I'd get there. And again, Almada is just better by like 1 or 2 spots in every single thing. And I told you that I think if you took Luciano out, FCC are still good. They're not Shield winners, but they're good. If you take Almada out of Atlanta, I think they basically crumble. So that's why I've got him at the second team. Talk to me about any of you. Actually, let me give you my 3 left wing, right wing.
Yeah.
You can give me your 3, and then we'll talk about the strikers. So left wing, Barreal, again, I talked about anybody who played as a left wing back or a right wing back really was looked at as a left winger or a right winger for me, for the most part. Barreal in that group, 3rd most fouls drawn, 4th most shots taken, 3rd most goals scored, 5th most dribbles completed, 7th least dispossessed player, most crosses completed, 5th most assists. The attack blew down that side for them. And you could tell it was really, really, I'll say interesting that FCC, they started a second team against Red Bull, and they were abysmal, dude. They were so bad for 60 minutes. Barreal and Acosta came on, and it just spark flipped. They were unbelievable game changers, and that's how I know Barreal should be in one of these teams because, oh my goodness, these guys were crazy.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of have them hard done because there just wasn't exactly like a wing back spot in any of my teams, and I don't remember where we left off. I think I was saying something about I can't remember what we were talking about.
You were talking about
Barreal.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I kind of did him hard done here just because I don't have any wing back spots in any of my teams, and I definitely think that's his role. Like I don't think he's a fullback. I don't think he would work in a 4 in the back, but he is like I think he's probably unquestionably the best wing back in the league at the moment.
Yeah, no, 100%. Dude is unreal. Everything went down his side. Like I said, they brought those 2 guys on. I turned to the FCC fan next to me. I go, we're going to lose this game because they bring such a dynamic change that I think I was surprised we handled it. On the right side, Bongi Hongwane right? I think he was listed as a right-sided player. Um, he drew the most fouls of the players that I analyzed, and I'll just quick check here that it is a total of boop, 18 players. So of the 18 players, most fouls drawn, most shots taken, third most goals, fourth most dribbles, fourth most assists. Um, Again, he had that span of time where he was like Minnesota's best player, bar none, before Reynoso came in, and then Reynoso and Pookie came in, and he kind of balanced out. But um, yeah, he was super super good. Um, Again, had other things that he was very good at, but what kept him out of that first team was that he was dispossessed the most amount of times of any player.
Yeah, I really felt like he had a stronger season statistically, but then I looked and he only had 8 goals, 3 assists, which was way lower than I was expecting it to be. And
Right,
I know
because he
he's
came up and he blew up for like 2 weeks.
so I feel like it hurt him because I think his hottest point was Leagues Cup. I feel like he was red hot in Leagues
You
Cup.
know what? That might have been it. He was a League's Cup baller.
He
That
was,
might,
and then I think he cooled down once it went back to MLS.
yeah,
I mean, he
that's totally
it sounds
fair.
like he does the little things that aren't caught in the typical goals and assists, but I still weighed that pretty heavily because I think he's an attacker, and I think at the end of the day, your job is to get involved in the goals and assists and score the goals. So him being at 8 goals, 3 assists, and he might have some second assists in there that I'm not counting, but it felt a little low for me to get him in there. But one thing that's shocking, he is an amazing defensive winger. His defensive statistics are phenomenal for wingers. It's crazy. He must be tracking back a lot.
Red Bull better be looking at him then, 'cause that's
All
that's right up their alley.
right, so is that your three in the attack?
Yes, those are my three.
Okay. I'm gonna go just really quick through Hani and Christian Espinosa because you covered them in more detail already. But
Yep.
Hani was a tough one to leave out of the first team. I think it probably was down to a shape thing, but I felt that Lucci and Almada were a little bit better than Hani this season. And I don't think Hani had a bad season by any metrics, but I think those two did a little bit more than what Hani did this season. Certainly in terms of like the passing, dribbles, creation part of the game. I think that's still a strong point for Hani, but I feel like Hani played more as a striker than like an Almada or Lucci, who probably drops a bit deeper. And so that made me put him on the second team as opposed to the first. If I went double striker, he would definitely be in my first team as well. But his non-penalty goal percentage was a lot lower than I expected. He was 54th percentile in forwards for non-penalty goals. So I know he has 15, but I think there must be a decent number of them that are penalties this season. And we know how you
Could
feel
be.
about penalties.
I have a feeling if I'm gonna yell at you about anything, it's gonna be about in your third team because I have a feeling I know what you're gonna do. I'm gonna have to yell at you.
I don't think you are going to yell at me.
I go change your team so I can yell at you.
Okay, I'm sorry. And then the one I did want to talk about, well, I didn't talk about Christian Espinosa, but I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Espinosa is one of the best wingers in the league this season. He's been dominant all year. He's a huge part of that San Jose attack that's getting them into the playoffs, like I predicted. And then Carlos Heel is the one I wanted to talk about a little bit more because we haven't talked about him. I feel like definitely not his strongest season. I think we've seen better from him. I think his MVP season was better, even if he didn't deserve that MVP. Justice for Hani Mukhtar. But he still had a really good season. I mean, he's 99th percentile in progressive passes. He is 98th percentile in shot creating actions. He is 82nd percentile in assists. Like, he's still the same playmaking maestro that we've known him to be. It wasn't his strongest season, but he still had 11 goals, 7 assists. And I think he only had 2 pens. So he's not racking up the goals from penalties. Like, he's scoring open play goals. I mean, I don't know how many of them are like free kicks or whatever, but he's scoring a lot of non-penalty goals. He's creating just as much as you would expect for him to create. So he got into the second team for me. I mean, I think there's an argument that you can maybe swap him out for somebody and drop him to the third team. I don't think he's in the conversation for the first team, but I was happy to get him in there for the second team.
I reserve my judgment.
I figured.
Yeah. Let's talk strikers. You threw in Julian Carranza, which I like. You
Yeah,
don't. I like that one. Tell me about
I think I went with Julian Carranza over two strikers in my third team, mainly because I felt like Carranza was a little bit more well-rounded in the striker spot. I think there are certain things that the other two strikers are better at in terms of the way they play striker, but I felt like I really liked that Carranza was super well-rounded. He was 85th percentile in non-penalty goals. He's 82nd percentile in assists, uh, 73rd percentile in passes completed. And I know the defensive statistics aren't important for a forward, but he was heavily involved in the defensive numbers as well. I mean, he was 89th percentile tackles, 88th in blocks, 83rd in interceptions, and he was clearly heavily involved in some kind of must have been pressing system or he was dropping low or something, but I felt like he was doing all the little things and getting fully involved in the attack, and just a personal opinion for me, but I just like that a little bit more than the other two guys. So I went with Carranza here for a second team.
all for it, dude. All for it. For me, I've only got two strikers here. One of them is Giacomakis. The dude's got 15 goals in like 20 appearances. Like it is
Oh,
unbelievably dumb.
he's putting up Chicho Aranjo numbers.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought about him. And he's got 23% of Atlanta goals. So all that stuff I talked about before, where it's like, oh, minutes should matter. They do, and he's outperforming the minutes that he's played, which is absurdity. And then Brian White, dude, my guy from the good old MLS Super Draft, third round from Duke. I think it was actually a first rounder, but anyways, um, 15 goals, 28% of all of Vancouver's goals this year. Um, Listen, when you want to be good, you need a striker who's going to score goals. You can ask Red Bull; they know all about it, or the lack of it. And Brian White has found his form in this team under Vanni Sartini. He deserves the recognition for the work that he's put in because he got sent away from Red Bull because they thought he wasn't going to amount to anything. He wasn't going to be good enough. They wanted to get money for him. Vancouver believed in him. He put in the work, and now he is one of the best strikers in MLS. I'm really happy to say that. As much as I would love for him to be in our kit, happy to see him grow from where he was to where he is.
I think you're a homer and you're just backing your boys.
Cry.
Should we finally get to the third team?
Let's get to the third team and do it relatively quickly. Don't make me yell at you.
No promises.
I'll
Do you
let
want
you
to
go
start this one
first.
off?
Yeah, you know what? I'll go first. In goal, I got Stefan Fry. At right back, I've got Alex Roldan. At center back, I've got Dave Romney. At other center back, I've got Jack Mayer. Daniel Lovitz is my left back. You can see a theme here. I got Darlington Nagbe in my sixth role with an honorable mention, and I mentioned this in the second team, to Junior Moreno from FCC, and I'll explain that in a little bit. At my number 10 role, I got Carlos Heel, as you mentioned before. On the left, I got Daniel Shallowy. On the right, I've got Facundo Torres. And up top, I've got Alan Polito, and I've got Julian Carranza.
Okay. Okay.
What do you got?
I have got Joe Willis in goal. And let me know when you're good, and I'll move
Yeah,
along.
good.
Okay. Defenders left back to right back. I've got some fun ones in here. I
Good.
got Kai Wagner at left back. I've got Yamar. I've got Tim
Oh, hold
Parker.
on. Freeze. Sorry. Didn't you put Yamar
I know, but
in your...
I swapped it for McGraw.
Was McGraw on your third team? You just flip-flopped him?
Yeah, I just moved McGraw to the second team.
That's a lie, but go on.
Yamar, Tim Parker, and not for the memes, Ryan Hollingshead at right back. Then in the two midfield positions, I've got Ricky Puig and I've got Artur. So I've changed the formation a little from the previous ones. So only two attacking mids this time. I've gone for Ryan Gauld and Facundo Torres. And then the two strikers for me, Georgios Giacomakis and Brian White.
Nice. Um, again, relatively close here. We'll talk again, defenders. We'll talk about anything that we don't have, haven't talked about already. Stefan Fry, I talked about Seattle being really good. He's one of the reasons why. Best goals against average, most shutouts, seventh in our favorite stat, PSXG plus minus, third least amount of goals conceded with number 28. At 36 years old now, I think he is. The dude's still balling. So, love that from him. I think he still is one of the guys who I would have loved to see in a U.S. men's national team kit at some point. I think it's a shame he never got in. But he is one of the big reasons that Seattle is and have been as good as they are and were. Another guy who will continue to take this team as far as they go.
Yeah, and I went Joe Willis for basically all the reasons that you had talked about before. He's had such a strong season. He's the goalkeeper for the best defensive team in the league. His save percentage is really high. Maybe there was some bias in me putting Daniel ahead of him, but he was unquestionably in the top three for me. And I would understand why you would put him at two, but that goes against my agenda,
as all of your picks do. Talk to me about your right back then. Talk to me about Mr. Ryan.
Oh, Ryan Hollingshead. We love some Ryan Hollingshead. I can't imagine he's strong in your numbers because he plays in 17 different positions a season. But he was good across the board per 90. His percentiles were really good. And I feel like you would think his attacking numbers would be stronger because he basically plays as a striker in like a quarter of the games in a season. And they were decent. There were some good ones in there. 92nd percentile non-penalty goals. But his defensive numbers were strong too. I mean, he was 98th percentile in aerials won, 87th percentile in tackles, 91st percentile in interceptions. He was involved in the buildup as well, 86th percentile in progressive passes, 86th percentile in touches. He looked really well-rounded this season. I think he's had a strong year. And I almost feel like the versatility is even another added bonus to him. He can play just so many different positions in the field. I was happy to get him in here for non-meme reasons, kind of like Brian White for you. It's kind of weird that we talk about these guys being memes of the podcast, and not in a bad way. Just like they're just I'd call like important parts of our podcast lore. But I think he legitimately is in the conversation to be in one of these teams, in my opinion.
I'll tell you, he's not even on my list because he doesn't hit any of the minute totals because, as you mentioned, he's so spread. Yeah. I do have a feeling though that if he did, or if I made some special exception, he'd blow him out of the water. No doubt.
There's always special exceptions for Ryan Hollingshead on this podcast.
So for me at the right back spot, Alex Roldan, again, just going with the whole theme of Seattle defenders, second least goals conceded in the league. You're going to look good in the numbers, right? Fifth most tackles made, fifth least fouls when making defensive tackles, which is great. Fourth most blocked crosses, fifth best passing percentage, second most completed crosses. So both sides of the ball, very, very good, which we know about. We know that he's a very good attacking player, but he's done very well defensively as well. I think he deserves a shout for being a staple of the very good defensive team.
Okay.
Now you've thrown Kai Wagner in there. Tell me why.
Yeah, I mean, Kai's consistently one of the best fullbacks in the league. And I don't think this was his strongest season by any regard. I think he's had stronger seasons, but I think he was definitely still solid enough that I got him in here. He was, as kind of expected for him, very strong in the attack, 98th percentile in shot creating actions, 97th in assists. I'm not going to go into the other statistics. They're way too much of a mouthful. 93rd percentile on passes attempted, but was pretty strong in some certain defensive metrics as well. I mean, 74th percentile in tackles, 92nd in interceptions, 86th in blocks. So I definitely don't think it was his best season. I think we've seen better from him, but I certainly don't think it was a bad season for him at all. And, as we've talked about as you talked about with Roldan, he's, a consistent fullback for one of the stronger defensive teams in the Eastern Conference and in the league in general.
Yeah, for him, again, I had 14 left backs that I looked at. He was dribbled by the 11th most times, and he had the ninth best tackle success rate. So, in some key areas there, he was relatively weak for me in the way that I analyzed it. He had the least amount of clearances, likely because he was so far up the field all the time. He blocked the least amount of crosses. And he also was the second least successful dribbles. So he was 13th out of 14 in successful dribbles, which makes a little bit of sense. But it means that from a coaching standpoint, the way I analyze this, right, is he can put in great services from early areas. But if I need him to beat a player and get to the line to cut it back, he's not as great at doing that. Which is means that he can be scouted relatively easily and neutralized. And then his passing percentage was kind of low too. So he was close. He was, I think, 6 or 7 on my list out of, so he was like third or fourth guy out. But as you mentioned, not his best season. There were people who were better, like
Yep.
Daniel Lovitz.
Yeah. Tell
Yeah.
me about him.
So Dan Lovitz, fourth most tackles, second most clearances, fourth most block crosses, most accurate long balls, most total passes, most accurate short passes, most crosses completed. So third most crosses completed, excuse me. Again, another guy doing it on both sides of the ball. I love my two-way left back, right back guys. I can trust him. And I think do you listen to Major League Journeyman?
No, I don't.
You should. Dax's podcast is great. Shout out Dax and Dan and Alan Gordon. They are really, really fun to listen to, but they also give really great insight on, the happenings of Nashville, pretty much. Um, Everybody loves Dan Lovitz. Dude is just a pros pro. Gets in, gets it done. How many times has anybody talked about Dan Lovitz this year?
This is probably the first time.
Exactly, right? But he's consistently doing the job. So really, really happy to get him in there because he's been, again, quietly really freaking good. So good job, Dan. Well done.
Hard to argue with putting in the left back from the best defensive team in the league.
Correct. Likewise with the center back. Jack Mayer was better than Walker Zimmerman this year as far as center back statistics go, which I thought was pretty interesting. Where is Walker? He might not have even gotten enough minutes. Yeah, I don't think Walker cleared the 2,000 minute mark.
He
Which is
surprisingly
probably
didn't play
why.
a ton this season.
Yeah, which is why he's not in there, right? So Jack Mayer filling in for him, eighth least dribble by player out of 34, I think it was a total. Fourth best tackle success rate, seventh least amount of cards, eighth best passing percentage. So again, nobody in my center back list had an average over 15, except for Michael Boxall, actually. So everybody was relatively close, but those key stats there, the tackle success rate was really big for him, bumped it higher. Dave Romney from New England, we've talked about how he was just such a staple of that back line that they went from Omar Gonzalez for 30 games a year to Dave Romney was freaking massive.
Quite the upgrade.
Yeah, least amount of fouls and total cards as a center back is very impressive. Third most clearances, most block shots, second most headers won. Again, doing the things that I look for in center backs, blocking shots, winning the ball in the air, being good in possession. He was good in all of them. So Um, Again, he could have been a little bit better in things like tackle success rate, where he was relatively low. Um, Interceptions, he was mid, but he had enough key um, key statistics there to bump him higher. So
You're missing
that
one very important key statistic for Jack Mayer.
his address.
He's leading the league in times doxed.
We don't know that for sure, though. We have to do a little bit of history research to figure that out.
Are you suggesting that it was a fake house? Or are you suggesting that someone else beats him in times doxed?
I'm suggesting somebody might beat him in time
Oh
stops.
God, I hope not.
That'd be wild. Um, but yeah, you had did you have Yamar, who you talked about already, and Tim Parker, who I think is a great shout. I love the Tim Parker shout.
I mean, statistically speaking, neither of these guys are like amazing. Um, I definitely think Yamar's had better seasons, but he was solid enough that I felt I could make the argument to put him in there. I feel like someone I couldn't pull myself to put in here, but looked pretty strong defensively. And I'm curious to know where he lands on your list because he wasn't in your list, so he must be a little bit lower. But it looked like Donovan Pines had a strong season this year, but I couldn't pull myself to put him in, considering his team wasn't great this year. But we could talk about that afterwards. But yeah, I mean Tim Parker, the statistics aren't great defensively. I mean, he was very good in clearances. He was pretty solid in interceptions. Uh, Pretty good in tackles in the attacking third, which is kind of surprising. So maybe he was just very aggressive up the field. The thing for me that the reason that I put him in there was, I guess, more of the non box score statistics stuff. Like, I just think being the leader in the back line of a team that is completely brand new and helping bring that team to top of the Western Conference, a team that so many people wrote off. I think it's just an unbelievable job. And I think he's such a key staple in that back line, even if the defensive numbers aren't super high. And even if St. Louis isn't one of the best defensive teams in the league, I just think his impact would be so sorely missed if he was not there. And so I felt like I had to get him into this team. And then Yamar, I think I already kind of spoke about Yamar, but
Yeah, you hit on Yamar already.
yeah.
Tim Parker, 23rd out of 34, 32, 34, whatever it is. Um, for some things that aren't massively bad, he just wasn't particularly dominant in any one thing, if that makes sense. So he was very good at clearing the ball fourth. He was 10th in interceptions, and that's pretty much where his successes lie. 12th in headers won, and 6th in total offsides won. But everything else, he was bottom third. So that's what brought him down for me, is that he was great. And I agree with you. Oh, I'm not in center. I agree with you that if you take him out of St. Louis is not a playoff team. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration, right? But he is so massive. He is so massive to St. Louis. So I completely agree with you in that sense. But for me, based off of the numbers,
Yeah,
where it's at,
he was not dominant in terms of the numbers.
no. I do want to go move on to the six here really quick and talk about Junior Moreno for FC Cincinnati. I bumped him out because I felt like the statistics didn't really highlight some of the important things that I was looking for, and I may need to now reanalyze things as we go forward for next year. He was the least dribbled by player with the fourth best tackle success rate. He had the fourth least fouls and the least amount of cards as a six, which meant that he was going to play. Fourth least dispossessed, which means when he got the ball, he didn't lose it. And the fourth best passing percentage. Again, when he gets a ball, he doesn't lose it. I have been a champion of the Junior Moreno undervalued team for years. I think that he is one of the most undervalued center mids in the league. I think that Nwobodo and Acosta get so much focus for being the one of the best sixes and one of the best tens in the league that people overlook Junior Moreno for being just consistently there. He puts all the pieces together. I really, really like the way he plays, but I couldn't put him in as a lone six in this group. So I went and put in Darlington Nagbe again. If I'm looking for somebody who's going to be defensively strong as well as keep the ball consistently, Darlington Nagbe's your guy. Third least dribble by player, sixth least in fouls and cards, fourth most headers won, best passing percentage, right? So things that I look for in my number six is somebody who can keep the ball, somebody who will win the ball out of the air, who's not going to give away a bunch of dumb fouls. And then I'm also looking for tackle success rate, making sure that you're not getting beaten consistently. He can be better in his interceptions and in his times dispossessed in the press, which is what brought him to the third team. But I don't think anybody can ever go wrong with Darlington Nagbe.
Okay.
Talk to me about your two midfielders.
Yeah, I went Ricky Puig. I'll start with him. He's very similar in statistics to Hector Herrera. I think plays a very similar role. He is an attacking engine for the LA Galaxy. And I know that he had a weaker season than I think expectations were set for him. But I think he was still pretty solid. I think he was hurt a little bit by the injuries surrounding him. No Gaston Bergman means that maybe he has to do a little bit. I mean, the statistics say that he didn't, but maybe he had to try and do a little bit more defensive work without Bergman. And no Chicharito definitely hurts as well. But I'm pretty sure Tommy Scoops had a tweet about this. So you can go see his tweet if you want to see the scouting report for him. But it is just all green in everything attacking, passing, ball control. It's like heavy green. He's one of the best midfielders in terms of those statistics. And then you look at the defensive numbers, and it is abysmal. It is abysmal. The highest out of tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, and aerials one, the highest percentile he is in is the 8th percentile in interceptions. This man does next to nothing in terms of defense compared to other midfielders. And I know that's kind of tough because he's getting compared to guys like Nwobodo. But he did play, from what it looked like, a lot as an 8 this season, which is why I grouped him in here. I think his attacking numbers were really, really good, and that's what got him into the team for me. But because he did so little on the defensive end, like even less than Hector Herrera, I dropped him down to the third team behind him.
That is one of my favorite tweets, by the way.
It's hilarious
because he follows it up and goes, "Is Diego Luna just Ricky Puig Jr.?" Because Diego Luna is the same thing, but I think he's in like the 89th instead of the 90th percentile, but still absolutely useless in the defense.
He's a regen. That's what he is.
I love it.
And then Artur, I don't think there's much to add there. I think you covered it a lot. Artur is just really good at what Artur needs to do. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, he is. Dax talked about this again on Major League Journeyman, where when they play him, they're so worried because he is the hardest working number 10 in the league, where he doesn't get a lot of the spotlight because he's in Vancouver. He pulls strings better than anybody, would ever expect somebody of his stature to do. And he's also covering 8 miles a game, tracking runners and trying to win the ball back in a press. He's very, very underrated. And the person I'm talking about is not Artur, by the way.
Yeah.
It's Ryan Gauld, because I was reading the notes that I took, and I was about to ask you, tell me about Ryan Gauld, and then I started talking about him. But I just talked about him for you. So tell me more about your attacking players, and then cut that out, and then slide it over there. And look, I'm adding to the conversation. It's way too late to be doing this, and we've been going for way too long.
Yeah. So for me, Ryan Gauld was an easy one to get in here in the third team. I don't think he's quite at the level of the guys that were ahead of him in my first and second team, but really, really strong season and definitely the key piece in the attack for Vancouver. He had 11 goals, 12 assists that helped him be high up in the percentiles, uh, 98th in assists, 88th in shot creating actions, 89th in progressive passes. Was also kind of getting involved in the defense as well. It seemed like he was dropping a bit. 93rd in tackles, 86th in blocks. Obviously not as important, but I think the 11 goals, 12 assists was definitely a heavy reason why he's in here. Granted, I do believe that a decent amount of those goals are penalties, but I still think the 12 assists alone is very enough to get him in the at least in the conversation. And I think he did enough in other regards for me to comfortably get him involved in this team. And then Facundo Torres, I think you'll talk a little bit about him as well. I think it was a solid season for him, certainly in terms of goal scoring. He was heavily involved, 14 goals scored. A lot of those, I think, are non-penalties. Not as much involved in the creative side of things. 71st percentile in shot creating actions and 28th percentile in assists, which I think dropped him a bit lower into the third team for me. I don't think he was quite on the same level as the guys in the first and the second team, but I mean, he's a young player. He's starting to get a good foothold in this league, and I think this was a good season for him to continue development into maybe producing on the level of someone like Thiago Almada. I know they have different styles; they're not going to play exactly the same, but to get to that level of productivity for Orlando, I think he's working towards that way, and I think this was a good season for him.
Yeah, I will give you my three attacking players. My well, I talked about actually I didn't, but you talked about Carlos Heel in the cam spot. Not much more to say about it than what you did, right? He draws a lot of fouls, he scores, he completes dribbles, he doesn't lose the ball. He makes key passes, that turn into goals, and he keeps the ball, right? On the left, I got Daniel Shalhoub. Again, MLS not known a ton for their brilliant wide players. I mean, they're getting better, but Daniel Shalhoub is still the second most fouls drawn, second most shots and goals, third most dribbles, second most crosses completed, second most assists from all left wingers that I looked at on a very poor SKC team this year. So he gets in there again, just maybe for lack of wide players than anything else. Facundo Torres, as you mentioned, some of the key things I looked at here: fifth most fouls drawn, fourth most shots and goals, fourth most shots taken, most goals scored, and sixth most crosses completed. So again, just a pretty good piece for Orlando, as you just mentioned beforehand. So I'll finish up here then with my strikers. Like I mentioned, Julian Carranza, you talked a lot about him, so I won't go too deep into there. But I did like the fact that out of the, I'm gonna look at here really quick. Yeah, out of the 14 I had, he was sixth best goal conversion rate. So when he shot the ball, most of the time it went in. Alan Polito for me, 14 goals, 31% of Kansas City's goals this year. He is, to me, the reason that they're still in contention on the last day. His resurgence from injury to key player in their attack, absolutely massive. So I think he deserves recognition for that.
Yep. And then my strikers, I think you covered them pretty in depth already, but I have the same two strikers you have for the second team: Brian White, Georgios Yakumakis. Yakumakis is as good as you're going to get for the style of play that he's going to play. He is not going to be creative and getting super involved in the attack like Julian Carranza. I mean, it shows in the fact that he has no assists. He's 29th percentile in shot creating actions. Like he's just not heavily involved in the buildup. But when it gets to him in a goal scoring position, he finishes the job. And that's why he is 98th percentile in non-penalty goals per 90, because he's just a goal scoring machine when he's in the right positions. And it helps when you have a guy like Thiago Almada to put you in the right positions. But
Right.
he's made the most of it. He's been lethal. And it's only the start for him. I mean, hopefully he gets more minutes next season and we can get a full season of Yakumakis. I mean, he's in the Golden Boot conversation then. Give him a full. I mean, a full season this season of him, he's winning the Golden Boot. I mean, 15 goals in 1,700 minutes. He's already in the conversation for Golden Boot, and that's with like a little more than half the time that the other guys are playing. So phenomenal season for him. Hope to see more minutes for him next year, and hopefully he continues, and hopefully he can continue it without Thiago Almada, because I don't think he's going to have him for next season. But
I don't know, man. Atlanta keep holding out for the right price,
as they should.
as they should. Absolutely.
And then
Um,
Brian
yeah,
White. Sorry,
Brian White.
sorry, you can go ahead.
No, I was just gonna encourage you to move on to Brian White because I'm tired.
Yes, Brian White is unironically in this list. I know we've memed a lot about Brian White in the past, but he was so good this year, and like quietly good, because I didn't hear much about him. I think most things going on in Vancouver were pretty quiet, but 15 goals scored. I don't think like any of those are penalties. So he's 91st percentile in non-penalty goals, 90th in shots total. Like he was just in and around the box. He was lethal. He was scoring goals. He was doing exactly what Vancouver needed him to do up top. And yeah, I don't really have too much more to add on that. I think you covered it pretty well already, but certainly with 15 goals, he's deserving of being in the conversation for a MLS Best 11 in one of the teams.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, we've been doing this for a while. The editing is going to be really fun because we cut it down. Um, Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it if you've gotten this far. Um, Make sure to go follow us wherever you get your podcasts, so you know when we go live, because we are posting as much as we can for the next couple of weeks. We got lots of stuff to come out. Um, so make sure you're there for that. Make sure you're following us on social media so you can see when we post our clips. You can interact with us. It's a lot easier to interact with it when it's in clip form than when it's in a 2-hour video. So make sure you're there to interact with us there. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We're all over the place. I will eventually get back to posting those. I get off in the next couple of days, so I'll go hard on the editing, I guess. Um, and then, yeah, thanks so much for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.